Hey, I'm Steve Walter, and today I want to talk to you guys about storage. It's time for a Tuesday Tips. Okay, so storage, right? As a digital creator, you need storage. You need a hard drive, you need a flash drive. There's all these different terms, there's all this different stuff. I want to try to break it down, make it as simple as possible. Obviously, this can get way more in depth, way more advanced, and there are many resources for that. I want to kind of keep things straightforward and simple, right? So many of you have probably seen this, right? Thumb drive, flash drive, many different names for it. And you basically plug this into your computer and you get additional storage. So as a photographer, or like I said, digital content creator, you need to start storing your files. You need to store your files and you need to back up your files. You need to store your files, back up your files, and then back up your backups, right? That way you can just make sure you don't lose anything. Because there's nothing worse than telling someone, I couldn't give you the job or I couldn't give you the project because I lost the data. It literally is the worst feeling ever. I've experienced it once myself, and I've been around other people, many other people that have experienced it, and it's not good. So, if I can stress nothing else, make sure you back up your content. Once you get past the thumb drive, then you start getting into these guys, right? These portable external hard drives. So what's the difference between these? Well, in this case, I have an old one that was 250 gigabytes. Wow, so big. And then eventually move up to 500 gigabytes, even bigger, and then a terabyte, even bigger, right? And if you're not familiar, it goes bytes, kilobytes, megabytes, gigabytes, terabytes, and we haven't really gotten there yet, but petabytes. That's really the only difference between these, is just the progression of size. Also the progression of technology, right? This was a USB, this was a USB, this is a Thunderbolt. So if you use a Mac, you're going to be familiar with Thunderbolt. It's a faster connection. On newer PCs and newer Macs, you have what's called Thunderbolt 3/USB-C. So it's sort of this hybrid, works in both. But basically, there's the speed and there's the size. That's really the only difference between all of these different hard drives, is the speed and the size. I progressed from one to the next, to the next, to the next. We'll talk about this guy in a second. You store your stuff, then you need more storage. So you take the old stuff and you transfer it to the bigger storage. And then that's a progression that continues over and over and over again. What I found is that I need to store a lot of data. That's where this guy comes in. And this is known as a RAID. Now specifically, this is made by a company called Drobo. We'll talk about that briefly, but a RAID stands for, it's an acronym, it stands for Redundant Array of Independent Disks. What it allows you to do is plug in multiple drives. So in this case, this can hold up to 4 drives. These guys, this one's 4 terabytes. What you can do is now 4 times 4, you've got 16 terabytes of data, and your computer will see that basically as just one big drive, depending upon how you configure your RAID. So that's really what this tip is about, is talking about storage and really getting to the point where you need to consider a RAID and why you would want a RAID, because that's really where I'm at now. I have this is old, and I've sort of outgrown it and I've changed my storage systems around, but really this tip is just talking about storage and how you can get away from having 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 of these things just hanging out. What happens is you start to lose track. What jobs are on this? What jobs are on this? Is this a backup of this? If you don't label things well, and if you're trying to migrate from one system to another, this can be a pain in the butt. So, RAID system, why do you want it? Well, you want it because you need to have a lot of storage in one place. And that's basically what it's going to give you. Drobo specifically is an automatic RAID, where basically what it does is it takes 3 of those drives and stores all your data, and then one of those drives is there for sort of security. In case one of those drives fails, which happens, hard drives fail, just like brakes on a car, they fail. If one of those drives fails, it has the ability to rebuild itself if you just replace that drive. So that's what RAID 5 is. RAID 1 and RAID 0 are a little bit different. Those are also very common RAID configurations. RAID 0 means take all 4 of these drives and combine them into one like super drive, and that's how your computer sees it, is one 16 terabyte drive that is really fast, because these hard drives combined together start to increase your speed and your performance. So RAID 0 is going to give you the best performance in the biggest drive. RAID 1, what that will do is that will take 2 of the drives and then mirror them to the other 2 drives. So you're basically taking that 16 terabytes, cutting it in half, and now you have 8 terabytes and 8 terabytes. Now, those two drives combined together are still going to be faster than one 8 terabyte drive because you're using two of these. So when you combine those drives together, you get additional speed and performance. But in this case, you have 8 terabytes and 8 terabytes. So basically, anything that gets put on here is automatically copied over to here. So you have more security, but less storage. So those are the three main RAID configurations. There's also RAID 6, there's RAID 10, those are other redundant configurations, but RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5 are the three that you would really want to worry about. And what I'm planning to do is get rid of all of this stuff and get a really big 4-bay drive that's going to be configured as RAID 5. So let me show you that. Okay, so here it is. I ordered a RAID from Synology. Well, I ordered it from B&H, but it's made by a company called Synology. There's so many different manufacturers, there's so many different types, but this is basically a big box that will hold multiple hard drives to allow me to store a lot of data in one location. So the benefits of a RAID like this is that I can configure it in RAID 5, as I mentioned before. I'm planning on putting in 4 8 terabyte drives. So it's a total of 32 terabytes, but I'm really only going to have accessible to me 24 terabytes, which is still plenty of space for where I am right now. The other benefit of this box specifically is that it allows you to connect additional hard drive bays to it when I need to expand later on in the future. Because this box is what's known as a NAS, N-A-S, Network Attached Storage. So what's the difference between this and the Drobo that I just showed you? Well, the Drobo is a DAS, Direct Attached Storage, meaning I plug that into my computer via USB and my computer sees it as a hard drive. This one, I connect to my computer's network and I can access it through the network. And I can even access it remotely from wherever I am in the world. So from my phone, my iPad, from my laptop, my computer at home, I can access the data that's on this from anywhere. Now there's pros and cons to that. A direct attached storage is going to give you faster transfer speeds because it's directly attached, right? This is going to be a little bit slower, but I can access this wherever I am. The direct attached storage, I have to be here. So those are just some of those differences. I settled on this device because this was going to give me the best of all worlds, at least for my scenario. Again, this tip is really just to kind of talk to you guys about storage. And when you then need to start thinking about scaling your storage. When you start with a single hard drive, everything is great and it's easy. And if you just need another hard drive to back it up, still really easy. But once you start needing 3, 4 hard drives because you're increasing your storage, and then you consolidate down to one big drive, and then now you need a second drive because you have to back that up. It's just this never-ending scenario. So what I'm trying to do is nip it in the bud now, where I'm at a point where I have probably 12 to 15 terabytes of data that I actively need to have backed up. So this guy is going to give me room to grow in the future. Now, with that said, I'm putting everything on here in RAID 5. It is not backed up. Well, I'm going to back it up, but just because I have everything on here in RAID 5, right, that one drive that can fail and I can just replace it, that's not a backup. Anywhere you search for, people will tell you RAID is not a backup. Unless I have a second box that has the exact same data, this is not backed up. So that's important to note. So what I plan to do is, instead of getting a whole other device like this, at least for now, I'm going to be backing up the data that's on here on some of those other drives that I have because I got to do something with them now. So I plan to back up all the data that's on here on those old drives, and eventually my game plan would be to purchase another one of these and have this in a remote location, right, like my house instead of here at the studio, and have it back up all of the data there so that now I have a remote backup or an off-site backup. Currently, the solution that I'm using is I have hard drive storing data 2-3 times, and then those are actually getting all backed up to the cloud. I use a service called backblaze.com, and the cool thing about Backblaze is that as long as your hard drive is connected to your computer, it will back up an unlimited amount of storage, which is great because I have, as I mentioned, a lot of data up there. So they offer a great service. Now, one catch is that Backblaze will not back up a network attached storage unless you're paying per gigabyte. So I don't really have a solution for that at this point, so my solution would be to back up all my data, move it off-site, or ideally buy another box and have everything backed up remotely. I hope all of the stuff that I'm sharing with you guys right now is not super confusing and super overwhelming. It's one of those things that I want to share this tip so that way it's kind of in the back of your mind, so if and when you get to a point where you say, yeah, you know what, I do need something like this. Maybe you can come back, maybe you save this video and you can reflect upon it later. So it's one of those things where I want to just talk about storage because I think it's one of those things, file management, workflow, storage, backup, those are all things as digital photographers or videographers that people just don't like talking about. But for me, that's where I geek out. And that's where this stuff becomes, well, not fun, but it's interesting because there's so many different scenarios. I can't tell you how many hours I spent researching on this box compared to other boxes. There's QNAP, there's MyCloud, there's so many manufacturers of NAS and DAS, it just becomes really overwhelming. And you really need to decide what's going to work best for you in your specific scenario. For me, this looks like it's going to be working pretty well. I definitely will do another update once I get this configured. I literally just got it today, and once it's set up and to see how well it works, to see how well it performs, and if it's going to be working well for me. So fingers crossed that it does the trick. So I hope that this wasn't too overwhelming. I really wanted to share a sort of general overview of storage and the progression that one might go through. Ultimately, I've settled upon this, and maybe you might too. If you guys do have any questions, though, that maybe I might be able to recap or clarify anything, just post a comment down below. So if you guys like the stuff that I'm talking about, feel free to subscribe. Also, head over to my Instagram, @SteveWalterPhoto, where I will be sharing my Tuesday tips there, and on my IGTV. I've got content kind of spread across the 3 platforms, depending upon which one you might use regularly. I like content here on YouTube because it's going to be more searchable in the future. So if you guys like that, stick around, and I'll see you next week.